Good evening, and thank you all for coming today. My name is Kishan Patel, and I help lead the CMU TEBA alumni group. I graduated from Carnegie Mellon Pittsburgh campus 2018 last year, and now work as a software engineer at Slack.
Nice.
For those of you that don't know, CMU TEBA stands for Carnegie Mellon University Technology and Entrepreneurship in the Bay Area. We are an independent org, self-organized and run solely by CMU alumni in working close collaboration with the CMU Alumni Association. Our mission is to build a strong CMU community within the Bay Area, connecting alumni with people, resources, and opportunities that they need to both thrive as well as succeed. How many people here are attending their first CMU TEBA alumni event? Woo! Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you for coming today. And how many have been to a previous CMU TEBA alumni event? It's always great to see familiar faces. Thank you all for coming as well. Woo. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the history of this org. For the last few years, we were formerly known as the CMU Entrepreneurs of the Bay Area. And this was a group that Will Sanders, back there, did an incredible job of starting as well as running solely on his own, organizing events, as well as a mailing list for the CMU alumni community. But this year we've committed to growing this community a lot more and have set a clear vision for what we want to accomplish. So we've actually spent the beginning of this year rebranding into CMU TEBA, as well as for the first time starting a board of 7 CMU alumni who are now putting in a lot of work every week to organize a bunch of new initiatives and events such as these. So please give a round of applause for the CMU TEBA board. So this panel is the first panel as part of a series that we're calling the CMU Speaker Series. And we're going to have one of these panel events every month focusing on a specific industry and bringing in CMU expertise in that particular area. But there are many other events that we are organizing as well, such as hikes, happy hours, as well as events that are specific to CMU founders and those who want to start their company soon in the future. We've also recently launched a CMU Slack community. That's been recently growing, and it's been really exciting to see the growth for that. We currently have over 320 CMU alumni part of that. So if you haven't heard of it or haven't joined yet, you can visit cmuteba.com to sign up. We've also recently started a VR, AR, and 3D channel, and there's been great discussions happening there so far, and it'd be great to continue the conversations that we have today and follow up in channel so we can continue fostering these relationships, especially within this community. There's a lot going on in this community, and there's a lot more updates and things that happen in the future. So, as I said, join the mailing list. All the information is on our website, cmuteba.com, and we look forward to seeing you there. So without further ado, today we're going to be discussing the landscape of VR, AR, and 3D technology, and where things are headed in the future. So with me today, I have 2 incredible CMU alumni who have been in this space for a while. It'll be really interesting to hear the insight that they have to share. So with me I have Shanna Tellerman. Shanna is the founder and CEO of Modsy, a home design app that allows you to visualize design ideas in the context of your own home using AR and 3D modeling. Previously, Shanna was a partner on the investing team at Google Ventures. Her career has focused on the intersection between design and technology, especially in the realm of 3D technology platforms. Prior to Google, Shanna was the founder and CEO of SimOps Studio, a spin-off from Carnegie Mellon that focused on democratizing 3D game development. SimOps was acquired by Autodesk in 2010, and Shanna worked there as a product line manager responsible for launching the cloud platform and Autodesk 360 applications. She received both her master's degree in entertainment technology as well as her BFA from Carnegie Mellon. Welcome.
Thank you.
Chuck Lee is an entrepreneur and VR, AR evangelist. Chuck is the founder and CEO of Construct Studio, where they are developing a template system called Vera that lets businesses easily build and gamify interactive visualizations, simulations, and training experiences for all platforms, including VR, AR, PC, console, and mobile. He previously worked at Microsoft Xbox RSM team and Pioneer VR content company Weber. He also is the project lead for the VR narrative film Imago and mixed reality game Guardian. Thank you for joining us, Chuck.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about a lot of things, but I wanted to first start with, for those that are not familiar, what does VR and AR, virtual reality, and augmented reality mean?
Take it.
Sure. So virtual, can you hear me? Is it?
Yes.
Cool. So VR, everything's virtual. AR, you see part of virtual, part of real world. That's the easiest explanation. And there's also mixed reality, which is called MR. So there's some example is basically you use the real world data to, but use the virtual world to be on top of that. So in total, people now, because there are too many terms, so people now call it XR, which some say is extended reality, or that X can be anything. So yeah, so I guess that's a simple explanation for that.
Makes sense.
So what are some of the different use cases between these two technologies? What have you seen are the most compelling ones, and how are the use cases tend to differ between them?
In my experience, I think the VR, at least right now, lends itself more towards entertainment. Maybe some training and simulation, but certainly entertainment, because it is so immersive, because it is a little bit harder to move around. AR, I think you can definitely get some interesting entertainment, but I think there's a lot of potential that's still coming in how it might augment the world around us with information. So for me, like the thing that always like is on my mind is like wayfinding or information about like the buildings or the people or the objects around you feels like the kind of one of the most natural things for AR. Again, either could kind of be bent either direction, but they feel like they're kind of the most natural places.
From the business perspective, I would say, like we work with a lot of clients, and most of the people when they want to work on the AR project is basically they want to use AR to interact with consumers. So like e-commerce, that like you can use Amazon to basically pre-visualize wearing the clothes, put in the closet, or like IKEA also do that as well. Pre-visualize a closet in your living room or your bedroom, and to pre-visualize that. And VR, the most client approach to us, they want to do like simulations, like training that you just said, because VR can help like to get rid of the instructor. For example, like a lot of the use cases, like one person has to train the whole classroom, but they only hear one time. They can really the audience can really learn from that without practicing it. And VR helps the instructor don't need to repeat again and again, and let the students to basically practice in VR and basically have fun with that, and also learn from step by step.
Shanna, you mentioned that most of the applications today are focused on the entertainment industry. When do you think we'll start to see the use cases kind of go past just entertainment and become used more for productivity? And what are like the next steps we need to get to there?
I think I'm interested in this XR idea. So I think the limitations that we have today when you think of like having to have a headset is that there's like a barrier to moving yourself into a completely immersed world that right now prevents a lot of people from doing that as like a natural first step. So either you're going to do it because you're already in a mode and you're thinking about entertainment, or you're going to do it because it's like training, like somebody's instructing you, sit down and this is now what you have to do. I think AR is much more natural for that, but again, there's still some unnatural things about sort of taking your phone and like peering through it everywhere that you're going. So the form factor for me is probably one of the biggest barriers, and I have not seen anything coming out, and I don't see anything on the horizon, like glasses included, that are really going to solve that problem. I feel like there's some like future where there's something we put into our eyes, or like something that's really non-invasive, where it really, it allows us to kind of have this seamless interaction with the world, where the world can start to be augmented. In the meantime, like the world that we live in, where you're sort of taking information and sort of post-processing it and leveraging some of the AR or VR technologies, but creating an experience that's accessible through the mediums that people are using today, it feels like that's kind of like our baby steps towards getting there, especially for purposes that are not just pure entertainment.
You mentioned some of the challenges that VR is currently facing, but the VR technology has actually been around for a really long time, for almost more than 5 decades at least. And yet, it still hasn't proven to be the future of technology that most people were expecting. Why hasn't it taken off yet? And what do you think will need to change for it to actually become the next big thing?
I feel like I was using maybe not the first generation, but not that far from it when I was at CMU.
Mm-hmm.
We were at the ETC in the early 2000s, and we were using the head-mounted display. And to be honest, like even though it's lighter and higher resolution, it hasn't changed that dramatically, right? So it was, very heavy. We couldn't spend more than maybe 30 seconds or 2 minutes before you were like, get me out of this thing. My head's hurting and it's making me motion sick. And like it would crash a lot, and like the resolution was pretty poor. But the kind of core concept was the same, which was like the experiences that really worked were these like really fun short experiences where you create a game. And like for us, we did like a dragon jousting game. It's like a perfect game because you're sort of like on a ride. The dragon's gonna move. You're not trying to move in the physical world, so you sit still, but you get the motion of moving and flying, a thing you can't do in the real world. And you're playing a game, so you're like looking at an opponent. You have like an activity, and you can win and lose. The whole thing, you go through 2 rounds. It's over in like 2 minutes, right? So that's like a perfect VR experience. I'd say that like, fast forward to today, it's not tremendously different. Maybe you can stay in there longer, but the best kinds of experiences are still ones where there's like focus, there's a core activity. That core activity is engaging, but it's fairly brief. You can learn it very quickly. You're sort of on a rail of some kind, or you can move, but you're not having to actually physically move. So like that kind of context that has been there since the beginning really hasn't changed. So I think we have to actually break out of that like form factor in some way before we're going to see a dramatic change in the kinds of content that can be produced and successful.
Yeah, so let's segue into that. You mentioned a lot of the technological challenges, especially with like moving around in a particular space. What role does content have in the adoption of VR and AR?
You're probably closer to content than me.
Wait, say the question again?
What role does content have in the adoption of VR and AR? And I know Construct Studio works with multiple clients, so you've like built multiple VR and AR experiences. Do you have any insights that you kind of learned from that?
Yes, just full disclosure. So I'm from Taiwan, so English is my second language. Sometimes I need to process it and translate into my head. That's why I take a second to process that. Yeah. So for the what's that question again? I'm sorry.
To start with, I guess, can you walk us through some of the VR and AR experiences that Construct Studio has created?
Yeah. So the earliest adoption is always gamers, because right now, so one thing about the VR adoption that takes so long, I think the biggest reason is the price. So for example, our professor, Jesse Shell, he also has a studio in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I guess everyone knows Pittsburgh. So he was a game designer at Disney before he joined CMU as a professor, and he worked on the Aladdin VR experience at Disney Quest. And back in the day, I think that was 1995, I guess. And the headset they used was like this big. And you know how much was that? That was $300,000, just a headset. Compared to the headset today, which is around, the cheapest one you can get, $200. The most expensive one is $1,000, which is 1,000 times more expensive before. So, and recently, Facebook just released a new headset called Oculus Quest. And they actually released a headset called Rift before, but it didn't really take off fast. It's because the price. Like recently, when they released the Quest, they immediately sold out. But I don't know how much they produce. So we never know if that's but it's always a good news to see something sold out. So the biggest difference, other than from the content, is the price. And come back to the content. Sorry, I go too far. But come back to the content it's always the gamers always has more money, or they are more brave to spend money on the device first. So that's why entertainment is the first industry that got adoption. And now with the headset price go down, that's why a lot of clients came to us, and then there are more training because it's immersive and it's getting adopted. Yeah, answer your question.
I think the other kind of like fun thing is when you create these experiences, there's two places that I've seen or experienced things that like feel like a kind of natural. One is at Sundance, they had like the big VR studio set up, and like it's kind of natural to a place like Sundance or a film festival or maybe a conference, like a place where you end up with like a lot of this downtime between other things, and people are sort of like looking for quick 2 to 5 minute experiences. And so it was kind of neat because you could like wander through. It was sort of weird because it was kind of set up as a bar, but everybody like, you know, was in their own little headset in like our own world. And you walk into a room and there's like a lot of people just like standing around. But so there's some strange social things about it. But I think they like the idea of like these kind of quick hits between things feels like there's something to that, because we all are like, you know, like I think we're all kind of impatient these days, and people are like on their phone or want to fill every second like looking at something. And so, you know, if there was an opportunity to like experience something and you experience it in like a little nugget and you experience it in a way that really like takes your mind away for a few minutes, I think there might be some interesting consumer adoption to that. The other one that I think I've seen like also like take off and work is when stores set it up almost like as a gimmick to some degree, but they set up like an experience that's somehow related to their store. Like I think it was H&M that did like a water slide, and they had like lines around the block. And like when you create a novel new experience and like a store that people like and something thematic to it, like people will come. And so, you know, I think companies like yours, like companies that are out there providing services to create experiences to companies that really are like paying to create something novel because it's hard to grab people's attention, I think they're going to also create some interesting content in this world.
Yeah. To follow up with that, our experience actually featured at Sundance in 2017. And the reason why was, you know, with Sundance, they're storytelling focused festival, and before there's only 2D screen that you watch movie with a TV with movie theater, but at Sundance I realized everyone was looking for new medium to tell stories. That's why there are more. There are a program called New Frontier. They basically use all kind of device, all kind of technology to tell a story, and that's why VR AR is very interesting at Sundance. Yeah.
You mentioned some of the barriers for VR and AR, especially the cost of these headsets. But while the cost of the headsets go down and make it easier for consumers to buy these headsets and put them in their own homes, the content also plays a large role because there has to be enough incentive for them to want to experience these new experiences that companies are creating. But a big challenge with that is that these VR, AR experiences are pretty challenging and can be pretty expensive to create itself. So Chuck, can you tell us a little bit more about what you're building, Vera, which is, or you can go ahead and explain it, which will play a role in making it easier for people to create content.
So a lot of people think that VR games is not selling well, but recently there was a really the killer app that people have been looking for. It's called Beat Saber. It's basically you use lightsaber and hit the bits. And I think a few months ago they announced they made $20 million already, and they are only 3 people team from Czech Republic. Yeah, so so people are waiting for good content to be produced, but just VR it's a medium that people haven't fully figured out how to make good content. We are still exploring with just new technologies coming out basically every month. So we are still figuring out what's the best way to tell the story, what's the best way to interact with this medium. And come back to Vera, Vera is basically a template system for creating interactive 3D content. So like WordPress is a template system for creating websites. So we want to create something that allows people that just like artists, they don't really know how to write code, but they want to learn, can still create interactive content, because they are the people that can create beautiful assets, beautiful stuff, beautiful scene to really let people enjoy the amazing, beautiful world. And we want to allow those people, those creative people, to really create something that engineers like us cannot create. I mean, we have amazing artists over there, but I'm just saying most of it, in average, engineers are not creating. I shouldn't say something bad, but but yeah, I mean, just we want to allow more people to get involved in the VR, because we think this is an amazing technology. Yeah.
So you explain the different experiences, and that draws people in. But another whole use case that we can see for VR specifically is it can become a new social and entertainment hub. It will start to change the way people interact with each other, and we already see tools like Zoom and FaceTime, which are changing the way that we interact with each other. There might be less face-to-face interactions, but it allows us to be able to more effectively communicate online. How do you think VR will change the way social interaction is moving forward?
I think it's interesting because I think like these experiences have been around for a long time. Also, like Second Life and like any MMO, like there's experiences you can play, you can go into, and you can have like a social encounter. I think that it's still been sort of like there's like a specific profile of person who's excited by sort of taking on like new personas and interacting in those like new worlds as a new persona. I think what's interesting is when you start thinking about it being you entering that world and doing it for like a productive reason. I do wonder though, like what does that world give you that a video conferencing situation doesn't, for example? So like, you know, if you can basically set up now from any phone and any laptop a pretty good video conference and pull in anybody and everybody and do it in, depending on the conference system you're using, a couple of minutes without as many trial and errors, then you get everybody in and you're just like talking and it's like you're all in the room together. So what would you want to do in the virtual world that doesn't enable? Either the environment you're in needs to be different, so you're all experiencing something together, which naturally goes back to entertainment, or you're taking on a different persona, at which point you get to kind of like play out a different life or just like an alter ego, etc. So I think you just always have to think about like what is the use case and like what are people really trying to achieve. I'm doubtful that like a virtual, like that going into a virtual world that is like, you know, this event where we're all our real selves and there's chairs and it's this room is like more interesting in the virtual world versus just like a video webinar that you would join. But maybe like if we were trying to experience something together that was different and that you could only do it in a virtual world, then maybe that would be the right environment for that.
I would like to follow up with that. So there's upside and downside. The upside is, let's say you want to, like for real estate, you want to, they will create a 3D model for you to visualize the room. But before, you can only see from the flat screen. You never experience to be in there with your, let's say you are the agent. You never be able to walk in the room with your clients. And now you are able to do that in VR. And you don't need to be in the same place, but you just join the VR conference. And you basically tell you this is the new closet, this is the new sofa, where was all the layout. And that can and also, for example, another like car company is using that as well to design a new car. And they just join the same conference room and talk about which part of the car like is good or bad. But the downside is social VR has been a big thing for a lot of investors, and they've been investing a lot of money inside. But it's like the same thing when someone on Facebook they add you on Facebook and they show you an anime or a picture of not a real person. Someone you hesitated because you don't know what he looks like or what she looks like, and you hesitate. That same thing happened in VR. Like there's a lot of harassment happening in social VR. I'm a VR evangelist. I shouldn't say that, but that's a real thing. A lot of people get harassed in VR because you don't need to show your real face, so you can do whatever you want. But in the meantime, there's still upside in social VR, which you make a lot of good friends without showing your face, because a lot of people don't like to show their face in the public, and this is a good way to make friends with just like gamers, they make friends with the online gamers.
It's interesting that you talked about the two use cases you did, because I would say like and a lot of people here, I guess, are interested in entrepreneurship as well. So I think like as an entrepreneur, you always have to think about like the problem first, and then think about the best technology to solve the problem. So like in the example of the real estate agent who's going to give you a tour, like again, I might say, well, what if they just had a really good video app and you joined a video call and they walked you around the room and they showed you all, like pointed everything out. Like I would just be positive, like if you were to go after a use case, and this happened to me with my first startup, like that you haven't fallen in love with the technology and then you're trying to find use cases for the technology, that rather you're trying, that you have like a problem in the world, like a real estate agent and virtual clients, and then you're looking at the entire landscape of technology and thinking about what would be the very best way to solve that problem for the client and for the agent that's going to actually scale and reach it to like as many people. So I think that's the danger in VR, is that we're like looking for opportunities rather than having an opportunity and then VR fits it.
Chuck, you mentioned a use case which was visualizing kind of a new, especially real estate, a new area. That sounds similar to what Modsy is doing. Shanna, can you tell us a little bit more about the problem that you're solving for?
Yeah, absolutely. And building on what I was just saying, I think the thing that was interesting, it's my second startup. My first startup was very much like I fell in love with 3D technology and I fell in love with virtual worlds, and we were sort of trying to figure out what's a business we can build around this. The second company that I've started was much more like there's a consumer pain point in the world, which is trying to imagine how things look in your space, like trying to design your home and imagine furniture in your space. What is the best way to solve that? And it started with like, could I just take photographs and like superimpose images on top of it? And it was like, well, those look kind of cheesy and not very realistic. And then how do you understand scale, and how do you understand layout, and how could you move things in the scene? And so I kept coming back to, well, 3D technology really is the best way to solve that. But consumers don't really want to interact with 3D very much, and nor is there a great format to do that. So if we're going to create something for the consumer, the 3D really has to live in the background. And so the application we built, you take photos of the room on your camera and you submit it to Modsy, and then we use our technology to basically build that into a 3D model that's accurate to scale of your space. Our designers use 3D technology to design and lay out the space, and then they render it out photorealistically, and it gets sent back to the customers. So the customer has what they would think. They're like, oh, we're using AR or VR or whatever, but really they're just looking at rendered images of their space that now looks like a catalog where somebody has like redesigned their entire space, staged it, lit it, it's photorealistic, and then everything in it is fully shoppable. And then they can interact with it in sort of like progressively more complex ways. So the first way is like, let me just flip through all the images. I already know how to do that because I use Pinterest and Instagram. I can like click on the hotspots and I can see what all the products are. But you can also, from those hotspots, you can swap in product. And so we have like a pretty complicated technology in the background where we're like launching the 3D model and we're swapping out the product for you and we're re-rendering it, but it all happens in a couple of seconds, and it's all through like that 2D image, so the customer doesn't have to do a lot of work. Then they can go into a full 3D model. If they wanted to, they can go into the 3D editor and then they can like move things around. I would say like some customers love that. A lot of customers find that hard. So again, you have to like always think of that end consumer when you're building it. So for us, we've sort of, I think we've married, for me, like the best of both worlds, which is like the things I love building, which is all the cool 3D technology, but that's all like masked from the customer, and we try to build like a really easy, simple interface that works on every device and in every browser, and that doesn't require like new training.
So 3D modeling plays a large role in Modsy, and it's becoming more important as we're starting to blend together this virtual world with the reality that we see, especially through technologies like VR and AR. So what trends have you started to see in 3D modeling, and how do you think that will affect just VR and AR moving forward?
I mean, I think we're still far away from the like, let me scan this chair and have like a perfect 3D model chair that's actually like a great model with great materials and textures that I could put into different environments and light and then render. What you can get though is like a pretty decent, if it's like a single object, a pretty decent photo scan where it's going to kind of have messy mesh behind the scenes, and it's going to kind of like paste the photo around the outside. And if all you're trying to do is like get a 360 view of that chair, that's pretty cool. So that unleashes, I think, some like 360 interactive opportunities online, but that's not like the killer solution. The killer solution is when we can like come up, take a few photographs, and then it like instantly 3D models this, and it can be used in all of our different content. It can be used in games. It can be used used in like the renderings that we're doing. It could be used in anything. But we're pretty far from that right now. There's a lot of complex challenges to that, not just the scanning technology, which, you know, everything right now, like a lot of it's about depth sensors and a lot of it's about just like getting a clean scan that doesn't require a lot of cleanup. But then you layer on top of that like good lighting conditions, good materials, all of those things right now are each of them is like an independent almost company that can be built just to solve that problem.
I actually have an interesting story to follow up with that. So you just said, we know that that's really far away to render, just take a picture and make the 3D model out of this chair. But one interesting story is a doctor client just asked us, because they have a lot of live footage of their surgery. And they know that, in a lot of countries, that you cannot really show the live demo of the surgery, because that's illegal, and also not yeah. So his idea was to have the video and use some sort of software and transfer that video into all 3D models, so they can show to all the people without violating the legal. And I told him that if you can find someone to achieve that, you're making a lot of money.
Definitely. I think the other opportunity is like now as we like accumulate more data to like that end, and we're starting to do this with the room capture. I think what we're going to end up seeing is that we blend together like machine learning, where you've like started to understand all the component parts of this. This seems like the faster way. And then it's like, oh, I recognize all the parts of this. I'm going to assemble this chair based on like computer vision and then like a big learning database and like already good structures and materials and like a clean geometry. And then we like automatically assemble it, and maybe like it morphs a little bit. Like that to me is like, somebody should be working on that here. If you're not, if you're interested, let me know.
So VR and AR are similar in a lot of ways, but the technology can often have very different use cases. And a lot of the big questions that people ask is, which one's going to win in the future? The general consensus has been that the prediction that VR will achieve mass adoption before AR, but in the future there'll be a substantially larger market for augmented reality. What are your thoughts on these predictions, and where do you think things will head, and how VR and AR will kind of work together or butt heads in the future?
I'm going to vote for XR.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think so. If you say 20 years from now, I think a lot of people will say VR and AR will converge into one product. So there will be a switch. You want to be in a VR game, just take a switch and you are immersed in the virtual world. Like Altered Carbon. I don't know if you guys watch that on Netflix. But like if you want some just information about the real world, just another switch, and you give you all the information, give you all the name. You don't need a name tag anymore. You know this person's name, age, height, whatever you share with the internet that will show in front of you. Yeah. So I think eventually it will converge into one thing. So XR.
And I agree, and actually maybe even sooner. And like if I was going to think about just like our product in Modsy, like I actually think it's like very seamless to move back and forth. Like you start with the pictures you're taking of a space, so you're walking through the space. We're probably using AR to guide you through the space, saying like go this way, like put the camera up, put the camera down. And then it moves into the background where it transforms it into a 3D model, and then it creates the space, and then we deliver back this space to you, and you can view it as like images. We let you view it as 360, so you can feel like you're in the space. And then maybe you want to switch back and say like, actually, there's a chair I see in the store. I'm going to like scan this chair. I'm going to take a picture of this chair at least, and I'm going to get that product added into my virtual space. So you can imagine how you sort of like go back and forth between these different modes depending on like what you're trying to do.
Yeah, but another thing about VR and AR is, so VR, it's already have a lot of consumer products out there, like HTC Vive, Oculus, PSVR. A lot of big companies are working on VR, and it's already consumer version. But the AR glasses, there aren't many, and even there's none of them are really have a massive adoption. But in terms of the technology, I would say AR is already like right now, and anybody's iPhone or iPhone 6s and above can work with AR. So it depends on if we are talking about just glasses, because AR glasses are really hard to make, because you need to fit into this small device over here, and so it's really hard. It's really hard to produce a thing, light enough AR glasses that you can use on your head. Yeah.
Sweet. So I have two final questions, and then we're going to open up to Q&A in the audience. We're going to do things a little bit differently this time. It's not going to be just raise your hand and ask a question. In a minute, I'm going to put on a link or a URL on the screen. On there, you'll be able to submit your questions. But this will also offer you the opportunity to upvote questions. So there'll be a way for you to hear the questions that that you're interested in learning more about. So I'll put those questions, I'll put that URL up there, and then submit your questions, and then we'll go through those. Which industries do you think will be the first to adopt these technologies? I think beyond entertainment. And which industries do you think will have the most potential to be disrupted, maybe 5 to 10 years down the road?
I feel like it's going to be something training related. I want to say medical, but there's a lot of safeguards around medical. But I think there's going to be something that's industrial or enterprise where it is a like hazardous or hard job, and moving into like either VR or leveraging AR to augment that job is important. Like maybe it's construction or maybe it's building planning.
Mm-hmm. I would say all the industry can be benefited. We're working with hospitals. We're also working with senior housing. We're also working with real estate. We're also working with Hollywood studios and marketing agency. So to be honest, I don't know which one will adopt, which industry will adopt first. I think they will all, because VR and AR, it's a really good marketing thing to talk about, because a lot of people haven't tried it yet. Like in people in Bay Area, most people try VR and AR, but when I went to like outside of Bay Area, not a lot of people try VR and AR yet. So it's a really good marketing piece, and so people are still trying to use that as a marketing piece, and then visualize their service or their technology. So yeah.
So maybe it's experiential marketing.
Yes. I'll say that will be the good answer to that. Yeah.
Let's talk about in the far future, maybe 20, 30 years down the road. Between where we're at right now, what do you think will be the biggest differences and advancements that will happen? And what role do you think AR and VR will start to have in our day-to-day lives? That's different than how it is, I guess, today.
I think a lot more things are going to be screens. Like I think if you think about the world around you as becoming like touch enabled, and the windows and the walls, and now like again that idea of like let me transform this space or augment this space. I walk in and there's like messages there and there's things happening. Then you also could imagine an experience where like the whole of that environment turns into something virtual. To me that would be like, I don't know, an awesome vision of the future.
Yeah. And I think so. We came from computer, now laptops. Now we have phones, smartphones, and I think eventually the smartphone will go away. We just need to use our wearables, like watch or glasses, to do the interaction with all the information. Because right now, like a lot of time, I'm swiping phone on my bed, and it's very tiring. Like I believe everyone knows that. It's really not intuitive to do that, but you still want to do that. So once we have the glasses that, maybe what's that called? The contact. You can use the contact, you can just do it, like do this without holding the phone and then upping the phones anymore. Yeah.
Awesome. So we have a few questions. Keep submitting them, voting for the ones that you're interested in hearing. But for the first, do you think XR will ever catch up to the more traditional 2D interfaces?
No. I think 2D is the simplest form of interaction for any consumer. There's a reason that like we simplify things into 2D interactions even when we live in a 3D world. But that doesn't mean that there's not room for 3D as like a progressive step further. I think 2D is always going to be way faster.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
We haven't talked about privacy. So what are the privacy implications for these new technologies that are coming up?
I think it's huge. I mean, we've spent a lot of time thinking about this before we started the company. It's something we've always taken seriously. It's just like what's happening over the ship?
It's a off after.
It's quality construction.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the I lost my train of thought. It was too distracting.
Privacy.
Yeah.
Privacy.
Where was that going? Yeah. Anyway, we take it seriously. Oh, at the very beginning of the company, we were so nervous. Will anybody upload the photos of their room to this like random company? Because it's like you're walking around your room, like you're sending us your house, and aren't they going to be like, who's looking at these images? Like they're going to know my address and like all this stuff. And we were shocked. They're like not like in the history of the company, I cannot remember a single person asking us like, where are my photos going and who's looking at my photos? And so I think the world we live in is one where people, you know, if they're paying for the service and they assume your service is doing something beneficial to them, they're like way more willing to take that risk than they are like worried about the privacy piece of it. We, on the other hand, have been very worried about that, even to the point of like, we won't not release anything publicly, even the rendered versions of the home, until the customer gives us permissions, because we don't want the customer to feel like we like are putting their house out in public. Internally, though, we've had quite a few laughs from the crazy pictures that people take and the funny things that end up in their pictures.
For the privacy, one project that we work on with the hospital is that go back to the live demo, like because live demo is basically you are seeing a real person in surgery, but that's privacy. And I think one thing that VR AR can help is basically when you make it a 3D version of that, it's there will be you won't see the real person in the experience. So that can help to dismiss some of the privacy problem.
Thank you. What do you think is the most innovative AR or VR experience that you've seen?
That's a very most innovative.
Or is there a VR or AR experience that you've experienced that just changed the way you kind of looked at technology, or have a story of someone else that kind of had that first experience that?
I don't know that I've had an experience with AR that I thought was mind-blowing. To me, the most meaningful thing that happened to me with VR in particular was taking the BBW class way back when, and like I think realizing how hard it is to build things for consumers in VR. Like I think actually, basically, if you're trying to build an experience in VR, you're tackling the hardest problem in the world, because you're like fighting against the technology and consumer behavior and like complete autonomous control in any direction, which is like every other medium is like constrained in some way. So for me, like the most profound thing was going through that course and basically like project after project realizing like how many things can go wrong and how many ways you can fail, and then like going back at it again and solving the last one, but then like having a new thing that we also messed up and realize like, oh, that's also hard. And then like when you can get it right, then you can just like lead the customer or the user just a little bit, and they sort of like take the nibble and they follow that direction. How like amazing a guided experience can be, like when you actually like create that user experience in such a way that it feels natural and the customer just follows, versus you having to like give them a ton of information or a big tutorial.
The most mind-blowing experience, I don't have any like the positive one because I've seen a lot of the VR and AR experience. So I won't say there hasn't been a mind-blowing experience, but in the negative side, with VR, I can the most mind-blowing thing is you realize that you can use the VR to kill someone by making them really easily. So two things that can make you feel dizzy in VR. One is the frame rate, which the normal video is 20 frames per second, and in VR you have to be 90 frames per second to make it feel like you are in the real world's frame rate. And another thing is design. So when you move with your controller, and physically you're not moving, but your visual is moving, that somehow mess up with your brain and make you dizzy. So like a lot of people make the roller coaster experience. That's always the first VR experience that anyone, I mean, most of the developers, they will make that first, and then realize that doesn't work because they can make people throw up after trying that out. So yeah, like messing up with people's mind.
I thought of one really cool one. I don't know if you've been to Stanford. They have a lab where they've been experimenting with ways to like cure patients' traumas and fears. And they have one where you walk across like a beam that's like supposed to be over this giant pit.
Yeah.
I did that, and it is kind of terrifying because you feel like you can put your foot out and you're like, oh yeah, that blackness is still the floor. But I feel like I'm on this tiny little beam, and they like tell you to walk across the floor, and you just like really feel like you might fall off this thing. That one was from.
Yeah, I know. A lot of arcades are doing that, and some of them are really like they are really mean. They make make it shake, so you're like freedom to death. Yeah.
But it was also like there's also because you can't see anything, you're also sort of scared to be moving. That was the other.
I mean, those are great reasons why VR would be a powerful asset for training,
Very
right?
immersive. Yeah.
Creating new experiences which are tough to kind of simulate in real life.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey into entrepreneurship?
Well, for me, it started out of Carnegie Mellon. I was in the ETC, and I went to the ETC because I took BBW as an undergrad, and Randy Pausch was still the teacher at that point, and it just was, like I told you, like it was transformative. I thought it was the coolest thing I've ever done. And I didn't know like what that career would be, but I thought that something that pulled together computer scientists and artists and storytellers, and together we could create something that not one of us could create individually. I was like, whatever that career is, like I want to do that thing. And so I applied to the graduate school, went to the ETC. I think with my first project or second project in was this project that ended up taking on a life of its own, and I ended up spending like a year and a half at the ETC working on it. It was taking game technology and training emergency responders, and we were just using like a networked game engine. We were using Unreal at that point, and we were working with the New York Fire Department post 9/11, so it was like really amazing to feel like you could give back and use new technology and build this experience. And so at the end of it, I just like couldn't imagine putting this project on a shelf and being like, okay, well, that was fun. Now I'm gonna go work on The Sims, which like was my other option. And so I don't know, Jesse was like, why don't you start a company? I started one, it's not that hard. And so thankfully he made it sound like it was easy, which is not.
It's not easy.
And I think he loaned me like $10,000, and he was like, here's the bank account, he was a lawyer, blah, 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 blah. And 3 months later, we had like a client paying us to do some contract work, and I had 6 people, and I still didn't know anything. And then we like worked to license the technology, raised some seed funding, which took a while. And I ran that company for 5 years, went through like pivots, went through everything you go through that's like wrong in a startup. And then thankfully we made it out alive, and even through the downturn in 2009, and we were acquired by Autodesk. And so then I was like, I gotta go do that again. It was really fun. And so, yeah, here I am at Modsy 4 years in, and this is the second adventure. A little different. That company was 10 people when we were acquired. We're now 150 people and based in the Bay Area, and we've raised a lot more money. And some things are easier, some things are harder.
Mine is the same start. I came to the United States on August 22nd, 2014. The first time I landed in the US, because I came to CMU. The first project after BBW, we work on Imago, which is a narrative VR film, and there aren't many virtual reality films out there back in the day. So Amy, our director of engineering, and my co-founder Joel Ogden, we work on the narrative film VR film together, and that worked together really well. And we got featured at CGRAD, which is the biggest 3D rendering conference in 2016. But I did a road trip with Joel because we have a ETC as a campus in EA, but I don't want to ship my car because I think that's a waste of money. So we did a road trip here, and on the way we just kept talking about about VR and AR, and realized that there aren't many VR AR companies out there back in the day. So I came to in that road trip. Joel is a year above me, and and because he wanted to take a break, so he went to travel many places, and he told me that, Chuck, if I ever come back, let's start a company. If I never come back, forget about it. And then one day in May, I think it's in April 2016, he called me and said, I'm coming back, let's start a company. So, and then we started the construct studio in June 2016. I was here because I hate the weather in Pittsburgh. It's too cold. Everyone knows that. Too many snow. As a Taiwanese, we don't have snow in Taiwan, so that was really painful. That's why I came to this campus. And then we're supposed to go back, but I just hated weather, so I found an internship over there. So I stayed over here. But Joel convinced me to go back to Pittsburgh. It's because everything's cheaper over there. If you want to start a company, you find somewhere that's cheaper. So we went back to Pittsburgh, and then we lived together, and then rent a living room from one of our classmates, $100 a month. And then we ran there and we put just computers and everything, and we started working on the game called The Price of Freedom. And then after 3 months, we realized we need to start getting traction. We need to talk to investors, talk to more and the hardware providers. So we moved back to the Bay Area, and then we found a house to live together, just like Silicon Valley, the episodes. And that was really painful. It's because you never know when you need to stop. Because your teammate is always working in the living room, and our bedroom is upstairs, and it's like, oh, she's still working, he's still working. Should I go to bed? So that was and also like sometimes when we work hard, you need to eat, then there'll be dirty dishes, and there'll be more dirty dishes. And who's going to clean that? Oh, but we are in the company. Are we assigning my employee or my teammate to go wash dishes? So I'm also the head of janitor. Yeah, even still now, we rent the office right now, but I'm still the head of janitor. But now, Ben is also really helpful sometimes because he likes to clean. But I'm not going to judge anyone's if they are clean or not. But yeah, but eventually, after that, it's really hard to get a balance between work life and personal life. So we eventually moved out to the office, and that works really, really well so far. But still, like office sometimes a little bit dirty, and I'll become the head of janitor and come back to clean the space. And yep, that's the journey, the fun part of the journey.
It's an incredible journey.
Yeah.
We're going to take 2 or 3 more final questions. How do you think Facebook's ownership of Oculus will shape the future of VR?
I can answer that. So VR, again, the price is a big point for adoption rate. And that's the main reason why in the past 2 to 3 years, VR hasn't been massively adopted. So having a big player has a lot of money to burn. That's a really good thing for VR. And after they joined the venture to produce VR headset, Microsoft joined, Valve joined, HTC joined, everyone just joined. So with the big player over there, they give the whole industry more confidence, even though the adoption rate is not high yet. So that's a really good thing to see for us as a VR developer, VR developer.
How do you think 5G will change VR and AR?
I'm not sure I have it.
So one day because 5G, so in Bay Area, when there's a new term come up, as an entrepreneur, you always try to connect your company with that term. So one day I just asked my engineer, what can we do with 5G so we can raise more money? and Amy just told me like, just go to start another company. But I would say 5G will really affect the VR AR industries because like before you need to download the content. I mean right now, not before. You need to download the content and then play the content, play the game, play the experience. But with 5G, you can basically play or experience the experience without downloading it. So that's sort of the whole pipeline, and that will really help for the rendering as well. Like rendering takes days, weeks, months to render really high quality art assets. With 5G, we believe that everyone believes that can accelerate that process. So, so Verizon right now is really pushing the 5G and basically try to help all kind of company to work with 5G.
The only thing for us, I think that makes a difference is just like you take all the photos and like we want lots and lots and lots of photos. So the more photos you take, the better for us. And if that can happen seamlessly and we can upload that really instantly, I think that's a benefit, but it's like really specific.
Yeah.
Final question. How important is physical tactile interaction in XR adoption?
Tactile means the feedback?
The feeling.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fascinated with that because like one of the questions in our industry is like, well, what does it feel like to sit on the sofa? What does the like material feel like? Now that's a super hard problem. Like, how are you going to translate feelings of textures and materials? Actually, at CMU, they were doing some experiments. I went to one of the labs and they like were using like electricity and a bunch of other things, like sort of slightly shocking you, but like, but it would give you some certain sensations and like you get the feelings of different materials. And so there probably is some way that we start to use, I don't know, something like waves, etc., and we can start to like give you the feeling of texture and material. That would be fascinating for things where you really are trying to get a sense virtually, like, you know, you're buying a sofa online, which is now like a common thing to do, and you're reading a bunch of reviews and everybody's saying, some people are saying it's really comfortable and other people are saying it was so stiff, and that's so subjective. You're like, well, for me, I might think it's comfortable and somebody else thought it was stiff, or I might think it's like really stiff and that person thought it was really comfortable because they're comparing it against like wood or whatever. So that subjectivity, I think, becomes really fascinating for this space, for anything online, really.
Yeah. For VR training, again, it's the hospital experience, the hospital surgery experience. Like when they are doing the training, they have to feel the human body to have that feedback, that tactile. Yeah, but right now with the current technology, it's really hard to mimic the same feeling. So the only thing with the VR training right now for doctors, they can only help them to remember step by step, but not the feeling. But in the surgery, a lot of things you need to cut the skin. So you need that detailed feedback to really simulate the real experience. So that would be a really big part for training, especially for doctors.
Maybe we'll have the full body suits, and you can feel like you're hugging somebody.
Yeah, for dating, for Tinder, that would be a good thing to have. Yeah, that's a whole new other world.
That's probably the one that'll take off first.
Always, it's always.
Yeah, okay, so we're talking about VR and AR, kind of virtual experiences, but we're here in a real experience. And is it possible for people in the audience to actually dialogue and ask questions? Because you're moderating questions like that. You're choosing the tools to answer.
You're saying you want to take questions from the audience? Sure, we can take 1 or 2 questions.
Okay, I don't know.
Let's just say, okay, so AW Unite and Microsoft Reactor Lab, these are wild events. In AR and VR, these are things that we're building together. These are not things that are going to construct themselves by us watching and putting questions up on a TV screen. This industry is going to be built by all of us here in this room. We need to have an open discussion. And who here is in an AR and VR startup? Raise your hands. All right, let's hustle. Let's talk about some issues. Who here has some problems? I'll say occlusion. Yes, here we go. I want to say Modsy. Round of applause. You've discovered something really great. And in AR and VR, one of the problems is that the general public, like you said, cannot handle 3D models. They cannot handle virtual reality, and they really can't handle augmented reality. But what you've done is you've given them renderings of their space. And what's the most genius I found is that you've done something very easy. You've gotten them to take pictures of their space and simple measurements. And it's typically inside of their apartment or a room or 2 inside of their house. And this has been really great because modeling that is not a difficulty. You don't need a machine to do it. You can typically pay a 3D modeler 24 hours time, they can return it. And that has been a phenomenal thing and something I suggest everybody in the room take advantage of. that these kind of things are not difficult to do, but one of the problems that has been dissecting AR and VR is we've tried to do the impossible, we've tried to do too much, we've tried to introduce to a public technology that is far beyond their realms and capabilities. Simplification is the key to the success of this technology. Thank you.
Yay.
We'll take one more question if someone wants to give it a go.
So I think we've had this mass failure in the shareability of information. If you look at like queries on retail items, everybody goes to Amazon or everybody goes to Google, and they cannot get to the originator of the information about the product. Right? We're missing sort of that interstitial connectivity between people and the stuff they want to know about. So I fear when Magic Leap is giving us all headsets, etc., it's because they're rendering stuff out of silos owned by Magic Leap or Facebook or Google. But the missing piece is something that would allow anyone who owns or produces or lives in a space to offer up information about it. Is there something that's going to cause that to happen rather than these many walled gardens and proprietary silos?
The world's driven around incentive systems, right? Like, you have to figure out something. I'll just give you a really specific example again. Like, in the world we live in, it would be amazing if all the furniture retailers and manufacturers built 3D models. They own them, they offer them out into the world, we all share. There's a lot of products that can be built around that. We, at the beginning of the company, I sort of idealistically thought that maybe you could get something going around that, right? Because there's a lot of benefits to creating those 3D models and to having standards around the 3D models and for that to be kind of open access. But like, nobody wants to pay for it and nobody wants to do the work for it because there's not any like initial incentive. There's no like monetary reward for them today. So I'd say like if you want to try to crack something like that, there's social incentives and there's monetary incentives and there's different incentive systems, but like cracking that code of like what creates something so that you get the benefit out of sharing something more publicly, and then how do you then start that flywheel going with a few contributors into the ecosystem. And so far nobody's really cracked it around 3D modeling content, right? Like all these communities have sort of set up shop, but then they become like and then everybody tries to sell you the models. And so if there was a standardization and like a free ecosystem with 3D models, I think we'd all benefit. But nobody's built that community and gotten that like social hook or the monetary hook going.
Shanna, Chuck, thank you for joining us today. As well as huge thanks to DocuSign for letting us host the event here, as well as Taylor for being our DocuSign host and helping with all the setup. We'll be around here for about another hour. As a reminder, join us for the discussion in the 3D VR AR 3D channel on the Slack community. And thank you all for coming tonight.
And also, we have a game that we are releasing soon. It's called Homodrome. This is the first time we have a public demo for the game, and I think CMU will be the best place to show that and get some of your feedback. If you can, try it and give us some feedback to let us to improve it, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.